What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
But Stephen used two words in there that is ironic. I wrote them down before you said them, and I love this because when you think in terms of vulnerability, vulnerability is not weakness. It's not walking around throwing yourself on
Yeah.
the stake. All right, vulnerability in what you're describing is humility.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the ability to be humble enough in your mindset to recognize there's a lot of information, there's a lot of success moving around you. Can you point in that direction so that you don't have to be the center pole that everybody spins around? That you create an environment that's safe, that others will raise up to it. The second word I wrote down over here was curiosity. It was really interesting is that in every example you gave, you didn't use the word. I think you may have used it once in there, but the image I had was each one of those leaders were curious about what other people knew, other people's perspectives, putting that on the table so that they could come up with, okay, based upon this, here's the course and here's the direction, here's the vision I have based upon what we're discussing. Correct?
Absolutely. And when you think about the curiosity, it's great because we're all learning. I mean, just think if we knew everything. Like I'll say that there's a whole distinction I teach in the workplace that proves that 50 to 70% of the time what we think about on a daily basis is incorrect. Most people think they're right, but I take them through an exercise and people may be, I don't believe that. That's okay. But I take them through an exercise of which people determine that 50 to 70% of what they think about on a daily basis is incorrect. Well, once they realize that and they come up with these statistics, I'd say that's actually good news because imagine if you were right about everything. First, you might be like, I'll win the lottery, everything else would be great. But if we knew everything and we were right about everything, life would be boring. The whole idea is how much we don't know. In fact, I've learned as I get older and older and older how little I know. When I was younger, I thought I knew everything. And then you get older and older and you realize you become exposed, you become even more aware of how much you don't know. And that's what makes life so wonderful. That when we're faced with a challenge, and I often say to people, when we're faced with a challenge and there's 8 billion people who live on this planet, chances are somebody has walked in our shoes and figured out an answer. The name of the game is to go find it. So when people say, there's nothing I can do, or I've tried everything, that's just ridiculous. I often say to people, imagine how arrogant and egotistical it would be if I said, I've encountered a problem where there's no answer. No, the odds are no matter what I've faced or facing in my life, somebody out there has figured out an answer. So the idea is to go search for that answer. And so in life, it's just as a whole, it's just terrific to realize how much we don't know and how many incredible answers are there and how many incredible people have walked in our shoes and figured out the answer if we're willing to realize we don't have all the answers, but out there is an answer.
Yeah, man, something so important with what you're talking about, because you talk about team performance, right? Team productivity, as we started this off. What you're now describing is team engagement, right? And the reason why is because what happens is when you're trying to solve a problem, you're trying to wrestle something in the ground, when you can make the team a part of the answer, you now have commitment, not just compliance.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, how about this? There's never been an individual that's won a championship. Never. And people say, but that's not true. Tennis players that win something or win Wimbledon or a golfer who wins, the Masters or whatever. But I'll say to them, all of those people have coaches, they have loved ones who've done a lot of things for them. They have a whole support network. They have a whole team around them. So there's never been an individual that's won a championship. It's always a team that wins a championship.
Very much so. And when you're describing that on the golf course, the caddy who carries the bag does more than carries the bag.
Exactly.
I mean, does more than carries the bag then. So tell me
But
about,
that's
go ahead.
So what I was saying, that's why we need a team. So there's a lot of work I do in innovation, and innovation is a team sport. because no one's ever suggested an idea and it's been perfect out of the box. It actually takes a team and other people to make that work. And even if the idea was perfect, you got to execute that idea. So that takes a team. Everything is a team sport when you think about it,
Mhm.
including innovation.
You betcha. And what you're talking about driving, I've been fascinated, been listening to you discuss how important from a communication standpoint in a team setting, the muscle of listening is as important, if not more important, than the muscle of speaking.
Isn't it interesting? I think great leaders, another trait of great leaders is they spend more time listening than transmitting. So we often think about great leaders stand up in front of people and say, this is where we're going and blah, 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 blah. But the great leaders spend so much time listening. In fact, even the best business development and salespeople spend more time listening than they do transmitting. The worst ones just keep talking.
Yeah, but
Anyway,
yeah, I call
listen.
it the difference between pitching and probing. The salesperson pitches, especially as you go up the sort of if you go up the sort of the chain of command when you're selling more complex high ticket items, the questions that you ask are much more important than the answers that you give. That's true in
Right.
sales, and it's true in leadership. Is that how many times have we gone down? As a matter of fact, you're talking about the things that we think about, what 50 to 70% of our time is incorrect. As leaders, how many times have we looked at a situation and started charging down the road and answering somebody's question? They give us a question, we start answering it, and then we realize by the end of it, they're waiting for us to shut up so they can go, yeah, but. How much would better off we had been stopping and asking questions so we never hear, yeah, but. And
Yeah.
now you got buy-in, don't you?
Yeah, and how about this? If you think about it, like even back to team dynamics, right? We walk in and we want to make a decision. Are we the first to speak or the last to speak?
That's
And
important.
yeah, because if you think about it as a leader of a team, if I walk in to a meeting and I tell them what I'm thinking first, it's going to shape what they say. But if I start asking people and I'm the last to speak, then I'm ensuring, or at least help ensuring, really hearing what they have to say, especially if I spend time probing. Again, the greatest leaders I've worked with spend more time listening than they do talking. So are we willing to hear it? And then the problem is, or a problem can be, is when somebody tells us something that we don't like, how do we react? Or how
Hmm.
about this one? When they say things that are factually incorrect, we want to correct them. But what I teach people is soak it all in. I do a lot of work in the intel space, with a lot of people protecting our country. And what I've learned from them, many things, but one of the things is to assume whatever somebody's telling you is not the complete truth. Assume whatever somebody's saying is not the complete truth and probably not the real truth. I don't mean like they're hiding it. It just takes a while for people to get going. And sometimes somebody will say what a problem is, but if you can listen and probe, you find out what the real problem is. In fact, I've worked with a lot of people who are running huge operations. And I'll use this example. Somebody comes in your office, says there's a problem. If you react and solve it, how often has that been the wrong solution? But if you can be patient and you can ask questions, you often find out that what they said is the problem is not the real problem. How about this? Have you ever met somebody you can't seemingly make happy? Like they'll say to you, I'd be happy if you did this. And so we go and run that and we do that. And they say, well, I'd be happy if you did this. And you go and do that. And it seems like they're never happy. And I'll say that to people and they go, oh, I know people like that. I'll say, well, consider maybe it's not that you can't make them happy, it's that you haven't found out what would really make them happy. Instead of just reacting to suddenly placate a situation, what if we probed further and really got, and then before acting said, all right, if I do this, would this really make you happy? Well, it would kind of, but this, anyway, you get where I'm headed with this.
Yeah,
Really
totally.
probing.
Totally. It's like, and you've probably experienced the same thing I have, right? Because we're sort of as coaches and consultants and with what we
Yeah.
do. How many times have you gone to a consulting session, wrestling something to the ground, and you start talking about somebody, the issue, different things, whatever, and you're about 10 minutes from the allotted time whenever it's supposed to come to an end. And then they go, oh, I got one more thing to talk about. And then right at the end, they go, boom. And they
And it's
drop
the
this
real thing.
bomb on you because it's taken time for you to probe to get their thought process going, to be able to get to that place, to be able to move things up. And that's that. I think it's important for us as leaders. That's why I love this message, Stephen, that you're bringing up. Is that our job is to bring clarity to situations. Our job is to go in and be able to ask questions, to be able to help people, to describe, to feel comfortable, to share, and so that you can uncover what the issues are, so you can then step up and be of help to them.
Can I share with a story that I think will tie this hopefully
Sure.
really well? So a while back, I was hired to coach this gentleman who had a difficult customer. And I said to him, here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask your customer on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate our service? 10 being it's ideal, it's perfect. 1 is horrible. What where would you rate it? And then once they give you a number, say what would it take to make it a 10? And then I said to him, no matter what the feedback is, just probe, ask for questions of clarity, give examples, whatever you need, or probe for examples. But whatever you do, do not react. Even if your customer says something that's factually incorrect about the service, don't worry about it, just probe. And what I want you to do is take all that information and then call me and we'll plan how to respond. But whatever you do not give the answer. Do not respond back. Just probe and listen. So he did that. He called me. He said, I said, well, how'd it go? He said, great. We've solved the problem. I said, why did you solve the problem? I told you not to respond. He goes, I didn't. I said, what happened? He said, well, I asked her on a scale from 1 to 10, and then what would it take to make it a 10? And she started talking and giving me feedback, and I did exactly what you said. I listened, I probed, and she shared more and more and more. And at a certain point in the conversation, when she got it all out, she started to then say, well, as I'm hearing this, and as I'm hearing myself speak, I realize you all are trying to do some things. And, come to think of it, we on our side could do better. And we could have done this, this, and this. And I think actually if we do this, this, and this, I actually think this is going to improve us working together. She solved her own problem by just listening. Now, I can't always say that things like this is going to happen, but it is really interesting. If we can get in a mode of really listening, often that will uncover the answer and solution to make a huge difference in our lives and the lives of others.
No, there's so much power in what you're saying, Stephen, because what happens is, whether it's in sales or in leadership, it doesn't really matter, is what takes place is the great barrier that we have to jump over from a communication standpoint is does that person feel heard and understood? Because
Yes.
once they feel heard and understood, it goes back to what you talked about earlier. That's when it feels safe.
Yes.
Until they feel heard and understood, they're not going to be open to you pouring anything into it. But boy, once you've done that, you've earned the right now to have an opinion. You've earned the right to shine light on things. The second thing that's so important with you're talking about is that there's more power in the words that comes out of somebody's mouth and goes back into their own ears than any word that you'll say. So if you can get somebody to expressing and explaining and sharing, especially in a team dynamic situation, a lot of times they can make the point that you might want to make, or somebody else on the team might. And now you've got engagement. Now you're driving things forward in a powerful, powerful way.
And even if that were not to happen, even if it doesn't happen, we learn a lot.
You bet.
It's just interesting because if you take two people who are in an argument or have had a lot of arguments and you pull them both aside and say, listen, do you feel like the other person is listening to you? And they'll say, no. And you ask the other person, no. Well, so that tells us something that we're in an argument. We should stop transmitting and just get where the other person's at. And the tough part about that is if they say something that really upsets us, we want to react. But if we really probe, we can hear the person another way. And once that other person feels listened to, gotten, and understood, then they drop their conflict and they start dropping their attack against us, and they'll start to really listen to us. So I found the key to getting others to listen to us is to really first listen to them.
That's massive. And it's really hard because what happens, I found is I know for me personally, as a leader, I feel like my value, my worth is me solving problems. And so what happens is I want to go into tell mode. I want to go into answer the problem because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm a leader. That's my job. That's my value. If I'm not offering those things, then I go down in value. And that is not the case. My value is to get results, as you said at the beginning. It doesn't matter how, I got to get results. And if I can get we accomplishing results, that's how you scale.
It's so true. And making others a hero. How about this? Where people will share an idea and it's maybe a rough idea, but can you morph it? Can you change it? Can you dialogue with people and make that rough idea into a great idea and give the other person credit? So often people want to take the credit, but great leaders give other people the credit. In other words, I have found that the greatest leaders make others heroes.
You betcha. You betcha. Now, before, yeah, I knew we should have blocked out like 4 hours to have this conversation. It's like-minded spirits or what have you. But tell us before we wrap up. And looking at I'm a big assessment guy. I love assessments. I mean, I use that as a part of my coaching, a part of my team development work I do. Use everything DISC assessment to be able to get people talking among. It's not used for diagnosis. It's used for dialogue. You've got an assessment that you refer to as a chat assessment. Tell our
Yes.
listeners about it.
So if they contact us, they can take it for free. So, but I want them to name the show and mention obviously the show, which is critical. And actually, I really asked them to not only mention the show, but do something out of what we talk about. But regardless, if they contact us and they can go to stephengaffney.com or same website, justbehonest.com, and want this chat assessment. The chat assessment is the consistently high achieving team, hence chat. It's how to assess your team. You'll be asked some questions and then you're going to get a report about your team and exactly what to do to correct it. So all they have to do is go to our website, justbehonest.com or stephengaffney.com, same place, mention the show, and I'd like them to share what they've done with what we've talked about. But regardless, if they contact us and they mention the show, we'll send them the chat assessment for free.
Super. I love that. And so, and I want people to understand the assessment is the gift that Stephen's offering you is the cool thing is it's information that's pushed up. Number two, from a leader standpoint, it's a way of getting feedback of what's going on in the organization for you to have data, have information. And in today's time, the more data that you have, the easier it is to plot a course out, especially as we go through these uncertain times we're wrestling with right now, can't we?
Yes, in fact, I'll give them one other assessment. So they got to mention the show. There's something called the leadership gravitational pull, and it's the idea that some leaders walk in a room and people are repelling other people, and some leaders walk in a room and they attract other people. I don't mean physically, but we want to be around them. Hence the leadership gravitational pull. Well, there's 10 traits, and so if they go again, mention mention the show, we'll send them that assessment for free. And then what they can do is take that assessment and that'll give them feedback in what they need to work on out of those 10 traits. And one of them is deeply listen, which we talked about on the show. There are other traits, and I can go through it. It's not like I'm trying to hide it, but the point is we're giving that assessment to them for free. All I ask is that they mention your show.
Super. I appreciate that then. So, and especially as leaders, it's our ability to look in the mirror, be able to
Yes.
anytime we can go into this process of self-awareness, because the 4 stages of leadership development is not learning how to evaluate and manage a person. It's learning how they're wired and who they are and sort of their why in life. And once I do that, then I can manage myself and figure out what do I need to do to adjust. But the first step in everything is self-awareness. Right.
Yes.
And so anytime you can go to this, and that's why I appreciate your graciousness with this. I love the fact that people can look at these awesome resources. So I'm going to give you the last word as we wrap up on this thing, Stephen. We've talked about a lot of key aspects or whatever. What's the final message you want our listeners to hear before they sign off and run down the road to move the ball?
Well, this is what I would leave them with. We talked about getting the unsaid said and honest feedback, but how about appreciation of honest feedback? And really, how about even appreciation? And so I often will say to people who've done exit interviews, when was the last time somebody left your organization because they were appreciated too much? Can't stand it. Got to get out of here. People thank me too much. It just doesn't happen. So the idea is let's appreciate others. And I don't mean just saying that. It's like people do more of what they're appreciated for. So as a skill set and as a leader, with our skill set, are we appreciating people enough? And if not, appreciate them. And if you had them in the room and you said to people, do you feel like I appreciate you? What would they say? If it's like, I don't know, it's something you can work on. And one of the things about appreciation is to be specific and results oriented. And here's what I mean to leave people with. It's one thing to say, hey, thanks, I love working with you. It's another thing to say with the specific results oriented, I love working with you. And what I specifically appreciate is how you get everything on time and the quality of the work that is so thorough that as a result, we've been able to give great service to the customer, and we just landed a big contract. Or how about this one? Or as a result, now other people are really excited to be part of our team. Whatever it is, specific and results oriented. That will take out the fear that many people have that, well, what if I appreciate people and it doesn't, and they don't get how meaningful it is. Make it specific and results oriented, and you'll never have that problem. So that when we talk about getting the unsaid said, appreciate, appreciate, appreciate.
You betcha. And I love that. That's a great way for us to put a cap on this thing, because what you're talking about, appreciation, is not just walking around patting somebody on the head. That's not what it's about. It's clarity. It's
Yeah.
what I wrote down today. It's your clarity around what's the definition of success. Success is when you do this. Success is when this result comes out. And more importantly, your step or your role in the process that led to success. Putting clarity around that, because we're not supposed to get our sense of self-worth out of what we do. Unfortunately, we're human beings. We get our sense of self-worth out of what we do. So anything you can do as a leader to help somebody feel a sense of value by doing the effort, not just the effort, but the results that's going out, you increase your effectiveness as a leader. So
It's so true. Let me just say this. It just so much stuff out of what you're sharing. Making others feel important. So I can give one other tip I just love to give audiences because it makes a huge difference in people's lives. If you want to do something special for a loved one or somebody you care about, get a card or a piece of paper and write at the top, lessons I've learned by having you in my life, what I've learned by having you around, and the impact you've made. Just write down a few lessons and give that to somebody. You're going to make their day, if not their week, if not their year. Share with people not only how much we appreciate, but the impact they've had in our life, because they don't get a chance to often hear that from others, and it makes a huge difference in their lives.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure we don't run past this. So it's you and I both keep saying the final word and we keep going, but I love it. So it's fun. But there's something you said that's real important. I can't think of a better way to end this show. Is that the thing about the lessons that I've learned from you that have been important in my life? Do that with your spouse, and I think just as important, maybe more important. Do that with your kids.
Mm.
Go there with kids, because a parent speaking that into a kid and showing their sense of value to them personally can change our society. Stephen, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. We'll have in the show notes how you can reach out to Stephen and get access to this, to the assessments he talked about. Check out his website. Check out his book.
Unconditional power.
Thank you. I can't read
Unconditional
my unconditional power. Check it out, because that's what we need. We need the power to be able to have the success in organizations we need. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.